Welcome to another edition of the Proactive Prevention Podcast, where we share powerful stories and compelling information about substance use and abuse, about addiction, recovery, and more. In today's episode, I chat with Mike Isom, an executive at Keele Medical, about some of the latest drug testing techniques, how testing can be leveraged to optimize patient outcomes, and the connection between fentanyl-laced drugs, vaping, and the dissonance between information on social media and science. Mike was inspired to become involved in the arena of substance abuse, recovery, and mental health after the suicide of his brother after a long-term struggle with depression and addiction. Join us to hear how Mike turned the tragic loss of his brother into a mission to change how our systems manage mental health and drug testing. Hi, Mike. Thank you for joining us today. So how you doing anyway?
I'm doing well.
Great.
Yourself?
Can you start by telling our listeners a bit about who you are and how you became involved in drug and alcohol testing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a registered nurse. My name is Mike Isom, registered nurse. Been a nurse for almost 18 years, and I've been in the lab space for almost the last decade. I did a lot of post-acute care, long-term care, rehab, ortho, home health stuff. And I really didn't even think about mental health or substance abuse until my brother kept relapsing. And he kept going into program after program. And so I started looking into them, and I just didn't like what I saw. So I thought I'd get into it, see if I could help out a little bit. And in the reality of it is, once I started getting into substance abuse and mental health, I got so sick and tired of lab salespeople coming in all the time that I went off on a lab one time. And I just said, I hate labs. I hate what they are. I hate pass fail. And a few days later, they came back and they hired me to work with them and make their labs better. That's the only reason I got into labs, is I hated labs so bad.
Okay.
And so I got in and tried to make some changes.
Tell me about your brother relapsing. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so my brother had a Percocet addiction, and just kept going back. And but what we really found out, the sad part about it, is he ended up taking his life about 7 years ago.
Boy, oh boy.
And it wasn't because of the Percocet addiction, is because he was self-medicating with his mental health meds. So he was prescribed antidepressants, but he wasn't taking them appropriately. He was taking the wrong one. And a lot of those medications can actually cause more problems than, everyone's so afraid of opioids and fentanyl and heroin. But if you take the wrong antidepressant, it makes things way worse. And so for him, he committed suicide about 7 years ago because of depression. And so it makes what I do as far as drug testing. I look at drug testing more as a medication management, right? As a way of a tool instead of pass fail. I hate how people use drug testing as pass fail.
Right. So what exactly does drug testing mean in a medical or professional setting now, would you say?
It depends on the provider, honestly, right? I mean, a lot of doctors will drug test, but they'll just make sure that there's nothing in there and you pass your drug test so you get your refill.
Okay.
And a lot of people are so focused on passing their drug test that they don't look at all the information you can get from a drug test. Are your meds therapeutic? Because think about it, you and I, we're different, right? If we take the same pill,
right,
it's going to have completely different effects on you as it will me. We're different in size, different metabolisms, different age. So you can't just say a 10 milligram Prozac is going to be the same for both of us. And that's what drug testing can do. Drug testing can let providers see what levels you're at. And if you're, say we say Prozac comes back at 184 for me, but it comes back at 29 for you. Is that good for you, or do they need to increase it?
Okay.
Right? Is that my level?
Okay.
Right? Because everyone just takes meds and you never know if they're working or not. You have no idea what your level is. There's a really abused medication called Wellbutrin. Have you ever heard of that?
I have heard of that.
Wellbutrin, right? It's prescribed all the time.
Okay.
But a lot of doctors joke around that that's meth light. People take way more Wellbutrin than they should because it's dopamine, right? It makes
Even
you
a
feel
doctor
good.
think of that. That's
Yeah,
great.
doctors think that too, right?
Yeah.
But if you and I are prescribed that, what is my therapeutic level? What is yours? And you have no idea unless you test, just like blood work. People don't know what's going on, so they test and they get blood work back. And
Okay.
based on the blood work, they treat. That's what I try and teach providers, parole officers. I work with defense attorneys, probation, parole. I've done trainings even with judges to help them understand better how to understand lab values, because you can't just say this level means you're high.
Okay.
Well, what level works for you? Right. And
Hmm.
and so that's where I've really started getting into more of the clinical labs. How do you use lab results in
Yes.
treatment or really anything?
Can I ask you how old your brother was when he passed away or when he was killed himself?
Is 40, 41.
41. My goodness.
Yep.
When people think of the drug testing, they often think of urine tests. But what other type of tests are commonly used in medical and workplace settings now?
So the standard is urine, right?
Mhm.
Everyone pee in a cup,
Okay. Okay.
right?
Right.
But think about that. If you say that, if I was to be working with you and HR came around the corner and said, "Hey, we got a drug test, pee in a cup," someone's going to watch you pee so you don't cheat.
Okay.
It is the worst. And so there are different types of drug testing. You can do urine, you can do saliva, they can even do blood work. I mean, I'm sure you hear on the news all the time someone was arrested and taken into the hospital to get blood.
Okay.
You ever heard of that before?
Of course I have. Sure.
Yeah. And so what happens is drug testing, depending on which instrument, so I call it drug testing 101. Okay. You got to know what test is looking for what. They're not all the same. And so you can buy a test on Amazon or Walmart or whatever. You got to realize what that's looking for. It's not the same. And so there are some tests like you pee in a cup and it gives you an instant read. Have you seen those before?
Yes.
Okay. It instantly tells you what's in your system.
Uh-huh.
What those are is those are a chemical reaction.
Okay.
Okay. So it's just a chemical reaction that identifies if a drug is present. But the same thing with saliva. There's oral tests that you can buy, and it's looking for what drugs are in your system. But different types of labs or different type of equipment will literally look for different things. And the quality of the test is different from each one. There's a huge difference between a point of care cup that rapidly says something and a lab that gives you a confirmation that says it's this exact drug at this exact amount. Apples and orange, it's completely different. And everyone thinks it's the same thing when it's not. And so when there really haven't been a lot of advances in drug testing over the last 20, 25 years.
Hmm.
And so when we met in DC, there is actually a new oral drug test that actually makes you produce saliva. So you get a more accurate test.
Right. Are there different panels or categories of drugs now that are typically tested for?
Yeah. They're usually, they're, they call them 10 panels, 7 panels. What a
Okay.
panel is it's looking for a class of drug. So for instance, oxycodone is an
Right.
opioid. So it will show up as it will show up as opioid on the panel,
Yes.
right? But
Uh-huh.
an opioid, that's a class of drugs. That's a lot of different drugs that it could be.
Sure.
Okay, a benzodiazepine. Well, there's 6 or 7 different benzos. Which one is it?
Hmm.
So these instant read tests, what they do is they identify classes of drugs, and so different panels, they'll just basically say, hey, this is present. That's called a screen. Then you send it off to a lab for a confirmation, and the confirmation is the only thing that's going to hold up in court because it's going to say this is lorazepam at this level.
Hmm.
Okay, or this is clonazepam at this level, whereas the other drug testing just says a benzo is present.
Hmm.
I wish labs didn't confuse everybody the way that they do, but
Right.
they confuse everybody.
Hmm. Okay, let's talk about laced drugs now. There's been an increasing concern over the laced drugs, okay? especially when the rise of substances like fentanyl. You dealing with that?
All the time.
How are labs detecting lace drugs now, and how does that affect the results of a test?
So it doesn't affect the results, right? Because when a sample hits a lab, they don't know what's in it. They run it and they see what's there. The way that they run it, there are these instruments called LCMS or GCMS, liquid chromatography, gas spectrometry. Okay, what it's doing is it's measuring the molecular weight of the drug. Have you ever Googled what a drug looks like and seen this big molecule of what hydrocodone looks like, or uh, uh, geez, I just totally drew a blank. Cocaine, heroin. They have a molecular structure that is a chemical structure that your body uses. These machines actually weigh it, then count how much there is. They're very, very accurate. Okay.
Okay.
So it doesn't affect the labs because the labs just test for what's there. The problem is the people giving the sample don't know what's in their system. Does that make sense? Or
Yeah,
no?
I
Okay.
guess.
So
Go
for
ahead.
instance, one of the things that I'm seeing like crazy right now is people. So for instance, you can test nicotine. It's called cotinine. Okay.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
LCMS can pick it up and say, this is exactly how much nicotine is in your system. Whether it's gum, vape, cigarettes, chewing, it
Okay.
doesn't matter. Your
Sure.
body turns it into cotinine. Okay.
Okay.
The problem is when somebody gives a sample and the lab result comes back and you see their eyes get all big, like, I don't do those drugs, the lab's wrong. Okay.
Mhm.
That's like saying, hey, I don't cook with red dye number 5, so the lab's wrong. I don't cook with that.
Okay.
But the lab's turning around and saying everything you're baking is red.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And
Okay.
so what's happening right now is people are taking things, putting it into their body without knowing, whether intentionally doing something and blaming the lab or
Mhm.
truly not knowing. When my son turned 21, I live in Salt Lake, right? When he turned 21, him and his buddies all wanted to go to Vegas. They're 21, they're adults, they're going to go to Vegas, right?
Uh-huh.
I sat every single one of them down and
I
I'm like,
remember
you
you
guys,
telling me this
you remember
story.
me? Okay,
Yeah.
tell me if my fish story changes, okay?
Okay.
But I sat them all down and I said, you guys, you don't take drinks from anybody.
Right.
You don't use a vape from anybody. If
Yep.
somebody hands you something, it's laced in something.
Sure.
Okay. So think about the problem that's happening right now. We talk about fentanyl, how fentanyl is everywhere.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, you got to realize drug dealers right now are taking fentanyl, putting it into pill presses that look like Oxycontin
Mhm.
and selling it to people. So people think they're buying Oxy when
Okay.
it's fentanyl. It's laced. I've seen marijuana laced with meth, laced with fentanyl. I've seen vape oils, okay, people vaping that are laced with prescription medications. I saw one kid get high and almost die off of gabapentin because he was vaping so much and he didn't know gabapentin was in his system. So when I say laced, there's really two kinds of people. There are the people that are intentionally doing it and got caught.
Right.
And then there are the real people that are just like, well, yeah, Jim, what do you got? Yeah, I'll take it, not
Okay.
knowing what's in their system. But it doesn't change the fact that when it does go to the lab identifies what's there.
Mhm.
Just like my dye comment, right? People
Uh-huh.
can say all the time, I'm allergic to blue dye. You're drinking blue Kool-Aid.
Mhm.
No, 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 I'm allergic. I don't take that. Blue dye is in your system. And
Okay.
that's what the labs can let them know. So if anybody's watching this that is even wondering about anything, don't, unless it comes from the pharmacy and you're the one that got that from the pharmacy, it's laced. And you guys, drug dealers are literally lacing their product with other things to
Mhm.
make their product better. You'll come back to them because your hit's higher.
Okay.
So it's everywhere, and their cities aren't exempt from this. Neighborhoods aren't.
Right.
It's everywhere. Don't take anything unless you know it's in what's in it.
Okay, that's powerful stuff. Thank you for saying that. So,
Oh, absolutely.
yep. Well, now let's talk about vaping.
Yeah.
Okay, vaping has become a widespread trend, especially among younger people. It's been that way for quite a while now. How does vaping relate to drug testing? And are there any specific substances or risks associated with vape products that the lab needs to be aware of?
So remember, we're just testing what's coming out, right?
Okay.
We're testing the sample that the body provided,
Okay.
and we can see what's in there.
Uh-huh.
The problem is what comes in comes out.
Hmm.
That joke, you are what you eat.
Right.
Okay. So think about it. When you vape, that is hitting your lungs and immediately getting into your bloodstream.
Right.
Nicotine gets into your bloodstream in less than 7 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. It hits your
Right.
brain in less than 7 minutes.
Okay.
So if I'm vaping something and I don't know what's there and I'm thinking it's nicotine, but there's gabapentin or
Hmm.
meth
Hmm.
or hair, whatever, right? That is hitting your system that fast,
Hmm.
as opposed to taking a pill, going through your digestive system, through your liver to your bloodstream.
Hmm.
Medications are designed to be absorbed through the appropriate way. When you change it around, you're having drugs hit your system that
Right.
fast.
Okay.
Okay. And remember, too, vape oil is only good because it's heated up into an aerosol. So people, and even when you heat it up, it's a cool mist. Think about it. Would you rather breathe hot smoke or cool breeze?
Cool breeze, I think.
Cool breeze, right? So you
Right.
have people that are vaping way more
Right.
than they would smoke.
Right.
They're vaping, and think about it. Why do I want to smoke tar and ash and the smell of cigarettes, or do I want to do watermelon or peach?
There you go.
So you have kids or adults or whoever has a vape
Hmm.
just tugging on that way more than they would normal cigarettes.
Right.
Okay. So your nicotine level shoots through the roof.
Okay.
And you know what? I come from the libertarian point of view. You do what you want to do, but don't tell me what I have to do. Okay.
Right.
That's how I look. If you want to do it, do it.
Okay.
But the problem is when people are doing things that they don't realize what they're putting in their system.
Okay.
And that's what's getting a lot of people. They think it's fine, but unless you have a disposable vape that you know hasn't been tampered with,
Hmm.
right? You pulled it out of the package and
Right.
started vaping. But if you're buying oil from some store, pouring it into your vape, you have no idea what's in that.
Hmm.
And that's the problem.
Right.
And that's where these drugs are coming from. That's where people are like, oh, use my vape pen or use my people. Kids go to parties all the time and they're passing stuff around,
Okay.
not knowing what's getting in their system.
Very good.
Okay.
Yep. I had a lot of questions already for you, and I think you just basically clarified the next question I had for you, and what are the common misconceptions about vaping and its effects on drug tests that you'd like to clarify?
Remember when people think they know what's in their system, right?
Okay.
And
Yep.
I call those people compliant. What
Okay.
what I'm taking is in my system. Okay.
Okay.
But then you got the other people that don't know what's in their system.
Okay.
Okay. Vaping is it's a transport mechanism to get stuff in your system.
Uh-huh.
And I want that. So this is how I'm going to get it into my system.
Hmm.
I could either take it as a pill or I can vape it.
Okay.
Now, there are not, and just to kind of clarify too, there are not a lot of people that are taking these medications and crushing them up and putting them into their vape oil, right? And then inhaling them. But people are doing it. And when you share vape pens, again, you don't know what's in that. It's
Okay.
the same thing as, hey, Jim, you and I are out fishing and my foot hurts. So you hand me a pill. And you say, oh, I take this pill. Okay, I'm going to take that pill. Then I get drug tested and suddenly Lyrica is present in my system. I don't take Lyrica. I'm not prescribed Lyrica. The lab's wrong. I don't take Lyrica.
Right.
Well, what did you take from your friends? Oh, he gave me a pill. Well, what was it? Wasn't Lyrica. Well, Lyrica's in your system. That's how labs work.
Okay.
Labs are identifying what is in the sample. Then it allows, and this is a lot of what I do with providers, is I help them work backwards and say, hey, these are the questions you should ask your provider or your client. Did you take a pill? Did you randomly vape? Were you around somebody that did something? Because labs, to clarify, labs are identifying what is there in the sample.
Hmm.
But a lot of times people have no idea it got it. Just like I'm drinking my grape juice, right?
Right.
I poured the packet in there. I know what's here.
Hmm.
But if I hand this to you and you drink it, do you know which packet I put in it?
Nope.
The labs are going to tell you what's in it, whether you know it or not. See the difference?
I do.
Okay. So it doesn't really affect the labs because the labs are testing the sample, but it helps the provider or whoever's performing the drug test to know which questions to ask, because there are some people that truly their eyes pop open like, I don't take that. What did you take that you didn't know? And then there are the other people like, oh crap, you caught it. I thought I could fool it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't affect the labs. What it really does is it just helps the people deal with what's going on. Because a lot of people think they can cheat drug tests, and you really can't anymore. There's a few advances that make it to where you can't.
Okay. Very good. You're explaining things very well for us, too, by the way. Thanks so much for your help. So, well, here's the next thing, and it's a biggie. The kids really know how this works for me, but here we go. Social media is full of advice, trends, and myths related to alcohol use and drug use, okay? But the science behind drug testing can be very different. I'm sure you know that. How and where do you encounter situations where public perceptions doesn't match the scientific reality of drug testing? So go ahead. How can you help us there?
So what social media says and what is real are two polar opposites. It's actually kind of funny because I used to testify in court a few times for a lab, and what the defense attorney would say is like, that doesn't match what your body does. So
Okay.
here's the difference with labs. Okay, there are different things that people take that, like for instance, urine. Okay, urine is widely cheated. It's really easy to cheat a drug test. And believe it or not, you can actually go on Amazon and buy fake urine that
Wow.
will pass the drug test. Okay. And the truly disgusting thing about it is, when you go on Amazon and it recommends other products that other people have bought. Have you noticed that?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, when you buy some on Amazon, it will say frequently bought together. It will make recommendations like, oh, if you're going to buy a hammer, people also buy nails. And they're like, oh, and it makes suggestions and stuff. With this fake urine product, the number one thing that it suggests are catheters. Okay. A catheter is what you use to get urine out of the bladder for people that can't
Yeah.
urinate, right?
Okay, sure.
But catheters are sold with this fake urine so that you can do what's called an oil change and pump the fake urine into your bladder so that you can give a drug test.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
It's ridiculous what is being used. Now you got to think about, regardless of what people do, this is what the lab does. Okay. The lab's constantly looking for, is it real? Is it not? But there's such a problem right now with urine and the abilities and the ways to cheat it, that the government is really starting to push for oral testing, for oral drug testing. Okay. And that's what we were talking about at that conference when we first met. The
Okay.
difference between oral drug testing and urine drug testing is that you're looking for two different things. Okay, so the product that I'm working with right now is called Keele Medical, and what we do is we have a new type of oral drug test that what it does is it makes you salivate. So I'm not just swabbing the inside of the mouth to see what drugs are present. I'm actually looking for the drugs that are in the glands to test.
Okay.
Okay. So for instance, if you had a problem, if you were drinking water in Pennsylvania, okay, you're in Pennsylvania and you drink tap water and something's wrong.
Right.
It tastes gross. They open a new well, right? When it's just, something's wrong with the water. If you wanted to test the water and see what's in the water, would you swab the kitchen sink or would you test the toilet water to find out what's wrong with the water?
Probably not.
No, but that's what drug testing does,
Okay.
right? Drug
Okay.
testing swabs the mouth and finds out what's in the system, or it tests the urine, which is in the water, or the
Right.
urine, which is in the toilet.
Right.
Why not test the tap water to see what's going on with the water?
Right.
Right. And that's what this test does. So this product, what it is called the Easy Saliva,
Uh-huh.
what we do is, and I really don't want to make this about a commercial, right? I really want to just answer your questions. What this new product does is it actually makes you salivate, which means we're now testing the saliva that's in your glands as opposed to just what's in your mouth. So
Okay.
all these stories that you read about of how to cheat a drug test, it's literally wash your mouth, brush your teeth for like an hour, use mouthwash, clean the sink as much as you can
Mm-hmm.
so that no drugs show up. When we're basically saying, well, let's test the tap water
Mm-hmm.
instead of cleaning the sink. That's the difference.
Okay.
Okay. So a lot of the products that are out there right now, a lot of them work. Not all of them do. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the majority of the ones that they're talking about that they're trying to sell are for urine drug testing.
Right.
And labs are making a shift for a better test that they can get a better sample. And that's what we do. So the whole point is get a good sample to the lab so the lab can get a good sample to test to know what's going on. So it's not cheated.
Great. Okay, you're helping me out here. Now, can you give us some examples of how misinformation on social media influences people's understanding of drugs or alcohol, and what's some of the common myths,
Well, one of the biggest myths that's going on nationwide is THC,
Okay.
right? When you take THC, it stays in your system for a long time. So people are always trying to flush it. But the hard realities are THC is stored in the fat. So one
Okay.
of the myths that I would just say, okay, is that when people are doing drug testing and they have levels of THC, there's always an argument, and I've heard it a ton in court, okay? If I'm losing weight, that's why I'm testing positive for THC.
All right.
THC is stored in the fat. But if you're going to use that excuse, you better damn well be losing weight. Okay.
Yeah.
Because people say it all the time, but I gained 5 pounds. So how did I lose fat that's going to test positive in my system for THC?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So if you're going to use that excuse, make sure you're losing weight. Okay. So THC stays in your system for a long time. I mean, it can be detected up to 45 days.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Or around you can't ever say up to because everybody's different, but it stays in your system for a long time. Right.
Right.
So rapid tests, instant tests could say positive for THC for weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Confirmation testing is going to show that pattern going down if they stopped using. Okay.
Right.
Misconceptions with labs a lot of times are people always blame the lab and they're very honest. I had a client one time call me from Arizona and she said, how am I supposed to tell this 91-year-old woman that she's non-compliant with her opioids? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he goes, I'm going through these lab results and nothing is there. I'm prescribing a lot of opioids. This lady's in chronic pain. How do I have this conversation with this client? So the doctor and I went through a few lab results and we noticed that her medications were present, but from a certain day forward, they weren't present. Something happened there. Okay. So he asked the client or the patient, hey, what happened on this date? And he said, oh, that's when my grandson moved into our house.
Oh, boy.
Okay. From that date on, you don't have any medications present. Does your grandson help you load your pill box? Yes,
Mm-hmm.
he does. How has your pain been since your grandson moved in? I'm in excruciating pain. I always need more meds.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Can you fill in the lines there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's what
Just
drug testing does.
right.
So people think they know what's going on. It doesn't change the fact of what the labs see. And you can say you're as healthy as you want, but when your blood work comes back and your lipids are through the roof,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that's the difference too.
Uh-huh.
These machines are identifying what's there. So when people are saying, oh, use this Jello product called Certo and add it into your system and that will absorb all the medications. That's absorbing the medications from the gut, not what's in your bloodstream. Right.
I
And
do.
so
Yeah.
when people just they don't look at the big picture with the anatomy and the physiology of what the body does and what labs are actually looking for, and they think these products will fix the problem when they're not even dealing with the system. That's like basically saying you're going to fix your sprinklers when you got an electrical problem in your house.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Okay.
that's what social media does is it just puts a lot of false expectations into people. And then
Mm-hmm.
when the reality hits, there's a lot of confrontation because, well, this said it would work, but we're not looking for that. We're looking for that. And so I think social media puts an expectation of cheating in a lot of ways
Yeah.
that is it's just false. It's not real. And new types of drug tests, completely destroy that narrative because it's looking for something completely different.
Where do you see the future of alcohol and drug testing heading? I guess is the question there, especially with the ongoing challenges related to new substances like lace drugs and vaping.
I I would just say there is a national push right now to get better information for law enforcement and for doctors, and they're looking for better ways of treating, and honestly, better ways of catching impaired drivers too, right?
Okay. Yes.
I think that I'm not an abstinence only guy. If you're going to do something, do it. Don't be an idiot and start driving. So a lot, sorry, sometimes Nurse Mike starts talking, okay?
Oh no, do your thing there, Mike.
But
Do your thing.
but people, a lot of times people think they can do whatever they want and they can get around everything. The science has changed to where I can tell exactly what's in your system that you've had in your system the last 24 hours through saliva.
Mhm,
That's accurate, right? And I can get an accurate sample to the lab.
mhm.
So when we talk about impaired driving, when we talk about doctors treating, a lot of what people were used to doing is starting to switch.
Mhm.
So basically, that flintlock you have isn't going to cut it anymore.
Right.
You got to make a change. You got to make a decision.
Mhm.
And so I would just say, coming from a nurse point of view, if you're prescribed it, take it appropriately. If it's not prescribed to you, don't take it.
Right.
And in the mental health world, more than anything, just because it works for me doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Just because you're doing really, really well with your anxiety and your depression doesn't mean that pill is going to work for me. And when people start moving medications around, mental health medications around the way that they're doing currently with alcohol, with
Uh-huh.
vaping, that's when people's worlds fall apart because the medications aren't designed for them.
Right.
And that's what I would just say is if your medications are working, great. If they're not working, be honest with your doctor. Let them know. Don't play this. I'm strong enough to be. Let your provider know this isn't working. I'm now hearing voices since I started taking this medication,
Mhm.
and the labs can help them dial in those levels of medications.
Okay.
But I would just say more than anything, the science is getting stronger and stronger. Court case law is going to get stronger and stronger.
Mhm.
And you can't just use the excuse, I didn't know that was in my system.
Right.
Because if you crash and you vape from somebody that impaired you and fentanyl shows up in your system, you did fentanyl.
Yeah,
You
you're
caused the crash.
sure.
I
Yep.
just say, just be aware of what you're putting in your system
Okay.
more than anything.
Yeah, fentanyl's around for sure.
It's there. I
Everywhere.
actually listened to a fentanyl task force in Utah yesterday, the state fentanyl task force. And one of the graphs they showed is that heroin is just tanking. Right? It's doesn't even make up, I think, 6% of the overdose deaths now. Fentanyl makes up almost 50% of the deaths. Okay. And one of the things to think about with fentanyl is, again, this is the doctrine of Nurse Mike right now. Okay.
Mhm.
You got to think about fentanyl when you think about the homeless crisis that's going on, regardless of where you live.
Mhm.
How do homeless people afford fentanyl? How do they afford drugs?
Because it's so cheap, I guess.
It
Is that
it
right?
is cheap, but drug dealers still, they're not going to sell you cheap drugs. They're going to sell them to you, right?
Right.
So how does a homeless person with no money get drugs?
Prostitution?
That's one of them, right?
Uh-huh.
But eventually that doesn't work either.
Do you know
The
what
number
is your
the
answer?
number one currency for illicit drugs is prescription medications,
Oh, okay. There you go.
right?
Okay.
So if I'm homeless, all I got to do is go to a homeless shelter, say my back hurts, get a prescription for pain
I
pills.
see. Okay.
I turn around, trade that for fentanyl.
Hmm.
Well, do you think drug dealers are just sitting on those prescription meds, or are they going to now sell them to the next group?
Right.
Okay. So that's the currency of drug
Hmm.
use.
Okay.
People aren't paying, they're trading things for it, right?
Okay. Sure.
The problem though is once those pills, those prescription pills are now in the black market,
Hmm.
how do you know it's really hydrocodone?
Sure.
You see?
Right.
So even if I am buying 10 Percocet off the street,
Uh-huh.
are they Percocet or are they laced in something?
Right.
Because if you and I need Percocet, who's better to go to, Johnny or Billy?
Yeah, okay.
Because Billy's his perk's a lot better than Johnny's.
Okay.
That's the laced market. That's what's happening.
Hmm.
And it's happening nationwide.
Do you see with Trump coming into office here now and the wall going back up, do you see things getting better now because of that? The Mexicans not coming over the border. I say Mexicans, anybody coming over the
Anybody
border.
coming over the border. I think it's going to be a deterrent, but I think it's more of, are they actually going to start prosecuting the people that they're catching? Because right now, what's that?
What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think so. I think if they actually start holding people accountable rather than just catch and release,
Yeah,
if they do, right? Politicians say everything. I hope he does. Okay.
right,
But if he can just start prosecuting, if you're a drug dealer and you get caught with fentanyl,
right,
that should be, I don't know, I'm not an attorney, right?
right,
But can't that be like unwilling? I don't even know what to say.
right.
like
I understand.
like unknown manslaughter or something like that.
Right. Okay.
But if if he if he and the people he puts in start enforcing our current laws, I
Hmm.
think it will dramatically change stuff. Because right now, no one's afraid to do anything. They can do whatever they want,
It's
and that's why we have such a big problem.
COVID's going to stop the Chinese market because that's where it's being made, right?
Correct.
And it's going to
Correct.
coming over to the south, southern part of the border. Then it's coming back up, right?
It's just coming right up. Yeah,
Right.
but if you can choke it off, and if
Right.
you can start managing it, because I mean, think about it with the test that we showed you, right? If I
Right.
can now do a quick swab test and know exactly what's in their system,
Right.
but now we have a second swab that can then go to the lab, you can now start tracking things that people haven't had before.
Right.
Fentanyl is a nightmare, but it's also, I feel, it's like a self-inflicted nightmare. If we're not going to follow the rules, or if we're not going to enforce the rules, who
Right.
knows what's going to come? But if we just start doing any kind of border protection and start holding people accountable as they're bringing it in, instead of catching them,
Hmm.
processing them, and then releasing them back out, which is what's happening all the time. No
Yeah.
one's afraid to sell fentanyl.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that's what changes.
Well, this kind of leads us into the last question, which is how can people educate themselves and learn about the associated risks with substance use today in society? I mean, how do you tell? I mean, what do you say about that? How can
You know,
people educate themselves and learn about the associated risks with substance use in today's society?
I would just, having worked in both areas of the substance abuse and mental health and also the medical world, one of the things that really just infuriates me about substance abuse is if you had a broken leg and you had 8 surgeries on it and you still couldn't walk, would you keep doing the same thing? Would you keep going back to the same doctor, surgery after surgery after surgery?
Probably not.
Probably not, right?
Right, right,
So the medical world is held to a clinical standard of outcomes. You break your leg, you should be walking.
right.
You have an infection, I should get better,
Yeah,
right? Now,
right,
it doesn't always work. I get that. The medical world is just trying to treat and make people better. But the medical world is held to an outcome measurement.
hmm,
Okay. If I can't see, glasses make it better. That's my outcome. That's my clinical outcome. In the
okay,
substance abuse world and in the mental health world, there are no clinical outcomes. It's just treat. Just treat.
right,
And I would just say on the substance abuse side, instead of sending your loved one, or if you're somebody that's been through this, my brother went through like 6 rehabs.
boy.
Okay.
Hmm.
If it's not working for you, find another program, because doing the same thing over and over again doesn't work. You got to find something that works for you, whether it is medications or if it is abstinence, right? Everyone's different. But I would just say when it comes to the mental health world and the substance abuse world, be an advocate for yourself. Don't just take a pill because someone prescribes it to you. Find out, see if it's working, do everything you can, because or a loved one. Why send them to another rehab?
Okay,
You know what I mean? Research it,
sure
find out
do.
what they're doing that's different.
Right.
Because there's too many people that just go through the same program, but it's with a different name over
Yeah.
and over and over again. It's not working.
Okay. Well, Mike, it's been great talking with you today. Can't thank you enough for coming on in, talking to us today here at the Road Radio USA podcast. And where can our listeners learn more about what you're doing as far as your work goes?
Check us out at keelemed.com.
Okay, keelemed.com. KEELE.com, okay? And Road Radio is thankful to partner with you to teach people of all ages about the truth and the risks of substance abuse. Okay? Thanks a lot, Mike. Thanks for listening to the Proactive Prevention Podcast. Until next time, this is Jimbo in stereo.